Hello, everybody. It is Monday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Christopher Carter for the Monday episode of the North Shore Drive podcast. Ray Fittipaldo is usually in this spot with Chris, but he's off with the NFL kind of in its dead period. So you're stuck with me today. We're going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf. What can we expect from that connection in year two under new coach Mike McCarthy's offense? I think there's a lot to talk through there. We've been focusing on some of the other receivers. Nice to talk about DK Metcalf maybe in a little bit more detail than we have at points this offseason. We're also going to talk about the safety situation for the Steelers. Lots of talk during OTAs and minicamp about how versatility is going to be key and how those guys may all be used to move around Jalen Ramsey, Jaquan Brisker, DeShon, Elliott. Lots to talk through there. Before we do, we want to remind you that this show is presented by FanDuel. We also want to thank Edgar, Snyder and Associates. Believe it or not, Edgar Snyder, their competition isn't other law firms. It's the insurance companies. If you've been hurt in an accident, watch out. Insurance companies will short sell you. They will deny your claim. They will do anything they can to avoid paying you. With over 40 years of experience, Edgar, Snyder and Associates has seen every trick in the book. When you hire their law firm, they'll fight the insurance company every day to get the money you deserve. They're available 24/7, so call them now, 1-800-94-EDGAR. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Okay, Chris, I think I set it up pretty well at the top, but we'll just go back. I want to talk about Mike McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers, and DK Metcalf today because I think we've been more frequently focused on Germie Bernard and Michael Pittman Jr. and these new guys coming into the offense and the dimensions that they're going to add. DK Metcalf is the guy they brought in a year ago. He was the guy we were talking about in that way in 2025. Last year, statistically, was his worst season. What upside do you think he has now that Mike McCarthy's in charge on offense? Talking a lot about 55 touches per game for these skill guys. And what do you think his upside is working with Aaron Rodgers for a second year?
I think the biggest upside for DK Metcalf is that this year he'll actually get other threats around him to go to help him make plays. Last year, I mean, there was Calvin Austin, the run game was there at the running back they had, but there wasn't that other premier receiver who defenses had to honor on every snap of the ball. And that's where Michael Pittman Jr. being there helps DK Metcalf. As much as we're excited, to see what Michael Pittman Jr. looks like in a Steelers uniform and what he does for the offense by himself, it's more so about the teamwork that these guys are going to be able to pull off. Listen, when you look at what DK Metcalf routinely wins at and is best at with the Steelers, you look at the slants, you look at the goes, you look at the sideline routes. And with those, you want to give him as many opportunities to get one-on-one where it's just him versus a defender. And with his size and speed, he can take advantage of a defender who's just a tad slower or just not as big as him and doesn't have to worry about that second defender. So many times last year, teams would throw an extra safety over top of him. They'd keep help underneath when they had a cornerback backed off of him. And so he often had to deal with two defenders regularly around him. And so here's the thing. If teams do that to the Steelers this year, Michael Pittman's a guy that he can beat corners one-on-one on a regular basis. And that could be something that with Aaron Rodgers, the smart quarterback that he is, if he's getting the ball quickly to Michael Pittman, let's say someone keeps doubling DK Metcalf. Well, then, okay, Michael Pittman's going to start getting those 7-8 yard catches a little bit more consistently. And that stuff eats you up over time. And then eventually when they have to say, okay, let's rotate some help the other way, that's when DK Metcalf can open things up a bit more. And I think that's the biggest thing he needs to happen, or he needs to see in this offense, is a little bit more attention thrown other people's way in the passing game. Because last year, when he was on the field, even with Kenneth Gainwell, what he was doing as a receiving back out of the backfield, even with Pat Freiermuth, when he did get the targets that made some impact in the game, everyone was focused on stopping DK Metcalf. He is a very good receiver. He's one of the better receivers in the league, but he's not the elite guy that's in the top five that even if you put double coverage on him, that he's going to break you as a receiver. He's a guy that does need one-on-one, does need a more balanced passing attack. And I think that's the most exciting thing that they're going to be able to bring to help him get the most out of this year.
So you think that will be the bigger factor than the Mike McCarthy offense? Because I think a lot of people are also looking at that 55 touches a game and saying, well, DK Metcalf should be getting a lot of them, and that should up the volume there. I tend to agree with you. I look more at being able to draw the coverage off him a little bit. But I guess let's talk through, what difference you think Mike McCarthy's offense will make for him individually.
Well, that's the thing here is Mike McCarthy is going to be a guy that knows how to use these different weapons in different ways to kind of get those matchups. One thing we studied here at the Post-Gazette, and I did an article about this a few weeks back, was how Mike McCarthy historically has used 11 personnel so much higher. When I looked at Sumer Sports, which tracks, personnel formations and personnel usages, and the Steelers use 11 personnel, the second fewest rate or second lowest rate in the league last year, only ahead of the Ravens. And so when I looked at that, I was like, whoa, that's pretty significant that they don't use 11 personnel that much last year. Now, other people tracked it a little bit differently. Sports Information Solutions had them more towards like, the bottom third of the league than necessarily just the absolute bottom. But point being, they didn't pull out 11 personnel. And for those who don't know who 11 personnel is, that is when you have one tight end and one running back, and that's the 11, the 1 and the 1. And then, because you can only have 5 playmakers on a field in any given offensive formation, that means you have, 3 wide receivers because, 2 minus 5, 5 minus 2 is 3. So so historically, Mike McCarthy has used a lot of 3 receiver sets. But when I asked him about that and his history of using 3 receiver sets and using 11 personnel, he kind of bounced off of it. He said, I've often based my formations out of how many running backs are out there. 2-back formations, 1-back formations, and so with the investments that they've made in to keep Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington, I think there's a good chance that you're going to see 11 personnel, but you're also going to see still 12 personnel where there's one running back out there, but you're going to see 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, but maybe one of those tight ends lines up like a wide receiver. And of course, that'd probably be more like Pat Freiermuth to do that. So I think what's going to happen is what Mike McCarthy's going to use is he's going to say, hey, I'm going to force your defense to get into some tough places this year, because you hear those 4, you think of those 4 top guys that would be your pass catchers in such a situation where 2 tight ends were out there. You'd have DK Metcalf, your number 1 wide receiver, Michael Pittman, your number 2 wide receiver. Both those guys, tall, big wide receivers. Then you have both 2 tight ends, Pat Freiermuth, who's just as tall as those guys, and then Darnell Washington, who's taller than everybody. You have 4 big dudes to get the ball to. That can be something that you could have as an advantage as a pass catching unit, where you're just out muscling other guys at the point of attack, and throw a high point in the ball. You'll be running through contact, creating yards after the catch that way. Also, blocking wise, can be an asset, and those are things that I think that Mike McCarthy's offense can help balance quite a bit, and that could make it dangerous for everybody. And then in turn, that helps DK Metcalf, because I think where DK Metcalf could really open up for the Steelers and Mike McCarthy's offense. And Mike McCarthy, he loves to use the middle of the field, when he has that elite quarterback. And I think here's the other thing about this is that, people have said, for years, Mike Tomlin avoids the middle of the field like a plague. He does with bad quarterbacks. When he had, rookie quarterbacks, second-year quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks, yes, he told those guys, avoid the middle of the field, because that's where most turnovers happen. But when you have an elite quarterback, you trust them to attack the middle part of the field. And I think that what you saw last year was an uptick of the Steelers using the middle part of the field because they had Aaron Rodgers. Now you have Mike McCarthy, where he's going to have multiple weapons that he can stress the defense in different parts of the field. And eventually that's going to open up more opportunities over the middle to DK Metcalf. You think about DK Metcalf's biggest play of the season last year was that catch and run he had against the Vikings in Ireland. Where'd that happen? Over the middle of the field. That's what they want to open up more of. But when you have more weapons that are forcing, hey, the safety can't just sit over top of DK Metcalf. This corner can't be as aggressive because he doesn't have that safety playing behind him, saying, hey, if I miss here, I got backup behind me. That's the stuff that you can stress. And I think that's the stuff that Mike McCarthy will try to pull out a bit more this upcoming season.
Chris, what do you expect from the continuity that the Steelers have not had in some time at the quarterback position? We know, for example, Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown cooked for many years and really built to an explosive place based on where Antonio Brown started. So now the Steelers have the luxury of, you have your top receiver coming back, you have your quarterback coming back in Aaron Rodgers. What kind of factor will that be in their mutual success this year?
I mean, I think they definitely established a connection last year. I think it's tough to, put it on the AB Ben level because those guys had several years to work together. And Antonio Brown, I still think there's times where some Pittsburghers, not you, Adam, but some Pittsburghers just think that, Antonio Brown should just happen, every so often. Antonio Brown was a truly special, unique player. He was the best route runner I have seen in my time covering football and watching football. he was just that elite as far as getting separation, fooling you where he was going to be. So many times you could not tell where he was going in his routes based off of how he adjusted it. He adjusted his body, how consistent he was in his release to kind of not give you any tips as far as where he wanted to go. And he did so many things at an elite level that made it impossible to cover him at times. DK Metcalf doesn't have that on his side. And I think that's the thing that, won't allow him and Aaron Rodgers to ascend to that level. But DK Metcalf is a supreme threat. One thing he has that Antonio Brown didn't, his straight line speed is something that Antonio Brown never had. And Antonio Brown was quick and explosive. But when it came to, running the 40-yard dash, he wasn't a 4.3 guy, and that's not to say Antonio Brown wasn't dangerous, because he absolutely was. But DK Metcalf is a guy that when he gets that one step on you, he can burn you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so I think that's where, if the Steelers can get Aaron Rodgers more opportunities to get DK Metcalf one-on-one, he's going to have a problem. But we saw for years, Antonio Brown, it didn't matter if you put two defenders on him. He was a problem. He was gonna chew up your defense. I don't think DK Metcalf does that, but I do think there is chemistry between him and Rodgers that can help both of them be more productive this year. But the real chemistry is going to become, how do they keep that going, all while they're still balancing the attack, spreading the ball around from playmaker to playmaker, from position to position, because it can't just be all receivers, can't just be receivers and tight ends. They also have to work in Jalen Warren and Rico Dowdle as well. So they have to make defenses honor a truly balanced attack, and I think that will help them go a long way.
Chris, let's talk numbers here. FanDuel, our friends over there, have DK Metcalf's over or under in terms of yardage this year at 800.5. He was at 850 last season, which I mentioned earlier was a career worst. His career best is 1,300 yards in 2020, but that's mostly been an outlier in his career. He's roughly been a 900, 1,000, 1,100 yard guy pretty consistently through his career. What number are you looking at for him in 2026 if all goes as planned and he's able to stay healthy?
I think he can get back to 1,000. I think that's absolutely something there. I mean, we forget he got 850 yards last year, and he missed the last couple of games because of that suspension. So, I think with other targets on the team that can take away attention from him, and a full season presumably, DK Metcalf should be really good, should be good to go, and should get that 1,000-yard mark. So I'd be hitting the over on his numbers there, just to give them that shot there. But I think this also depends on, can the Steelers keep Aaron Rodgers healthy? And that's something this offensive line absolutely has to do. As much as we're talking about the playmakers, this offensive line has to take a step up in improving for the run game, but also improving for protecting Aaron Rodgers. He cannot take the beatings that he took at times last year when they played the Chargers or the Bills or the Packers or eventually the Texans. They have to give him the time to work. And if they do, I think you get 1,000 plus out of DK Metcalf. I think you get, anywhere between 600 to 800 out of Pittman. I think you could get, maybe 400 out of Bernard, and then, work your tight ends in. They can get about, this could be a really productive year for Aaron Rodgers if all goes well. But you need to protect him to do it, and that's what's going to help him and DK Metcalf. When they have more time and less people are focusing on them, they're just going to find ways to hurt defenses even more.
We're going to talk safeties on the other side of this break. How will Patrick Graham use guys like Jalen Ramsey, DeShon, Elliott, Jaquan Brisker, Darnell Savage? Before we get to that, we want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom coffees are the delicious, low-sugar, brain and body fuel you need to win your day. All IQ Bar products are clean label certified and entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients. There are plenty of flavor combinations to choose from across all IQ Bar products, from mint chocolate chip protein bars to blueberry pomegranate hydration mixes to vanilla spice coffee, and even limited edition and seasonal flavors too. With over 20,000 five-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are fueling their busy lifestyles with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom coffees. Their ultimate sampler pack includes all three, and right now IQ Bar is offering our special podcast listeners 20% off all IQ Bar products, including the ultimate sampler pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64,000. Text MLB to 64,000. That's MLB to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details, and we will be right back. Second segment here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Adam Bittner with Christopher Carter. We're talking about the Steelers and how they plan to deploy their safeties this season. Chris, I know this has been an area of focus for you during OTAs and minicamp. The coaching staff is emphasizing versatility and having these guys be able to play in different spots within the defense. I mentioned the names that we're talking about earlier, right? Jalen Ramsey, DeShon Elliott, Jaquan Brisker, Darnell Savage, maybe some other depth guys mixing in there as well. Listen, we know the versatility can also be coach speak this time of year. So I guess my question for you, Chris, is what are your expectations for that group under Patrick Graham? Who are we going to see most and in what spots?
So here's the thing. Safety has become, an interchangeable position in the NFL, in today's NFL, where more and more teams that are playing at a high level defensively are deploying their safety so that there isn't just a strong and a free. It's two safeties that are basically playing deep most of the time and then alternating who comes down, who goes back, so that there's, the traditional sense of, hey, Troy Polamalu is strong safety. He plays closer to the line of scrimmage, and Ryan Clark is free safety. He plays deep. That classic understanding of the safety position isn't as prominent in today's NFL. Most teams want multiple safeties who could kind of do both roles. And I think that's what the Steelers are trying to do. And I've been trying to get more and more out of the coaches and the players about how they're going to play safety this season, because the Steelers had a big shift in the middle of last season with how they deployed their safeties. For the first 8 games, up to the Packers game, I believe, the Steelers had used primarily single safety shell defense. They used among the fewest 2 safety shell defenses, where they had 2 safeties playing deep at the start of in coverage when the opponents tried to pass the ball. And part of that was because for half a decade, basically, Minkah Fitzpatrick made it so that they could defend the deep ball extremely well with one deep safety, and that allowed to bring another safety down, and that safety could help against the run, help against underneath coverage, and that's where DeShon Elliott would be doing a lot of his damage when he was playing at his best. And so the Steelers thought they could do that again last year, and maybe they just put Juan Thornhill. If it's just, hey, Juan, just make sure the deep play doesn't get by you, and you're good. You don't have to bring the elite playmaking turnover skills that Minkah Fitzpatrick brought. But then Juan Thornhill couldn't even do what they were asking him to do. And so they had to adjust. And they said, okay, mid-season for the second half of the year, let's put Jalen Ramsey at safety since we lost to DeShon Elliott and we're cutting Juan Thornhill, and let's trade for Kyle Duggar. Now those guys will play split safeties for most of the year. And then from, I think it was week 9 was after the Packers game. I think it was pretty sure the Colts game was the first game that they made that switch. From that point on to the rest of the season, according to Sports Information Solutions, the Steelers used 2 high safety shell defenses against the pass, the 3rd highest rate of anyone in the NFL, which is a lot. And that shows they were willing to shift those to those schematics. I envision Patrick Graham to do something similar this year for the entire year. When we talked to him, he talked about, he said, you got to look at what teams like the Seahawks are doing. And the Seahawks were using that same information I looked at last year from Sports Information Solutions. They played the most 2 high safety shell defenses against the pass last year. They were the number 1 defense. They were the Super Bowl champions. And so I think what you're going to see is a lot of these guys doing it. When I talked to Jaquan Brisker during Steelers OTAs and minicamp, one thing he kind of let on, he was like, hey, I'm not a free safety. I'm a versatile safety. And I said, well, who is a free safety? He said, everybody is versatile, or, is a versatile safety. And so I think what you're going to see is less of one guy going back and playing deep coverage all the time and another guy come up and helping the run more often, more of 2 guys back, and interchangeably, one guy's coming down, one guy's going back. Next play, the other guy can go down, the other guy can go back, and making it so that it's harder for the quarterback to predict who has what role. Or sometimes both will stay back, and they'll help in different ways. But what Patrick Graham is trying to do is create more confusing pre-draft looks for pre-snap looks, for quarterbacks, where they're looking at, hey, you got to be able to read what we're doing. We're going to make it that much harder for you to do it. So that's going to be a big part of the change this season. And I do wonder how it's going to come over on this Steelers team, because, I think it worked in pinches last year as they made that adjustment, but it's been a while since they've played like that, consistently. And again, we're going through a whole new change. I think that's got to be one of the bigger challenges this team faces, because out of all the positions they have on this team, I look at safety and inside linebackers, the 2 positions where they have solid veterans there, but they have no star at those positions that I think can take over a game, and that could be something that comes back to bite them if some of these vets fall through, kind of like how Darius Slay and Juan Thornhill fell through for the cornerbacks last year.
Yeah, I did want to ask about the contract situation because I think you and I both expected them to address the safety position in the draft, considering how deep this class was. A lot of names we spent a lot of time talking about: Dylan Thieneman, Emmanuel McNeil, Warren, Caleb Downs, probably a guy they weren't going to get access to. But those we spent a decent amount of time talking about the safety position. They don't go that direction in the draft. You have Jalen Ramsey coming back. He's got 3 years under contract remaining through 2028. But, it's somewhat opaque how they intend to use him. Then you have DeShon Elliott with 1 year left after this one. Jaquan Brisker, Darnell Savage on 1-year deals. Are they looking for these guys to compete pretty hard and prove their value to this secondary for maybe, to become more long-term fixtures?
I think they are trying to see who's going to work long term. I mean, you look at Jaquan Brisker and his current deal; it's basically like, hey, this is a prove it contract. You do it, great. I mean, that's kind of what DeShon Elliott got, right? He got a very short term contract and then got an extension from the Steelers after he looked really good in his first year. I think that's what they're trying to do here because safety also, like market wise in the NFL, just isn't that premier position that everyone's investing in right now. No one's gunning out there and just shelling out all the top bucks for the top safeties or for like decent safeties. Teams will do that for edge rushers. Teams will do that for corners. Teams will do that for quarterbacks, wide receivers. But safety isn't one of those positions anymore. And I think it's because teams look at, the positional value as far as what positions flip the games more often, and it's or kind of structurally help you more. And safety just hasn't been that position for some time. Now, I still think safety is a vital position in the NFL, but I think what you're seeing Omar Khan do is say, hey, we don't have the Minkah Fitzpatrick anymore. Again, they traded him away. But because of that, we're just going to not over invest into this position with our with our funds. Put more money into sturdying the other positions and keeping Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, and Nick Herbig for now. Eventually they're going to dump money into that offensive line. So like they're going to do those things, and until they find a truly elite safety, they're just not going to pay these guys big money, and they're not going to try to go shopping to find the big money safeties out there. And I think that's a smart play. When Minkah Fitzpatrick was at his best, he was on his rookie deal most of the time. And that was something that helped that defense become elite for 2 years in 2019 and 2020 when they were top 5 in the NFL. So for me, at least, I think it makes sense what they're doing right now. I think they want to see how healthy can DeShon Elliott be this year because it's not clear how much he's fully recovered if he has. I think Jaquan Brisker is a guy who is, had a really good time in Chicago. Now he has to prove himself in Pittsburgh. If he does, they'll pay him to keep him around for a few more years. But they're looking to see who are the safeties they want to commit to long term. They're not sure about who that is yet.
Yeah, Chris, we're about a year after the Jalen Ramsey, Minkah Fitzpatrick trade. I believe it was June 30th last year. It's June 22nd as we're recording this today. How do you evaluate that trade briefly here before we wrap up, basically a year on, and what it's done to the Steelers at the safety position?
I'm sorry, you cut out right as soon as you said the name of the trade.
The Jalen Ramsey, Minkah Fitzpatrick trade.
Thank you. I was like, what? That was weird. But anyways, I think what's happened is, you saw Minkah Fitzpatrick go to the Dolphins. Didn't change them a whole lot. And I think that was the reason why they made the trade. Where they were like, hey, Minkah Fitzpatrick in the previous year with the Steelers, according to all the data and me watching all the games and looking, no one could beat the Steelers deep when he was playing deep. That was when he was cutting off the deep ball. That was it. You better go find someone else to pick on. And it didn't make the Steelers defense elite, but I mean, that's a heck of a job that he did there, even with only, I think he had one interception last year. Or was it last year? 2 years ago? No, 2 years ago when he was last with the Steelers. I think that was against the Ravens when he picked off Lamar Jackson, but that was still in a loss. But with the Dolphins, you saw it just wasn't working as much where he was the elite middle center fielding defender. And so them getting Jalen Ramsey was their chance to say, okay, let's see what we get here. But I think the unfortunate part for the Steelers was Jalen Ramsey isn't the same Jalen Ramsey that he used to be when people think of the best moments of him. If Jalen Ramsey was the shutdown outside corner it would have made the ton of sense. First of all, they probably also wouldn't have gotten him, if he was still that. And so they tried to put him in the slot. And there were times it really worked. The big hit he threw on Garrett Wilson that won them the Jets game. There were moments where he would float around and do some really good things. And how much he annoyed Jamar Chase. But eventually you kind of saw there were just times where it was just like, he doesn't have that same explosiveness. He's not that same shutdown guy that he had been when he was at his prime. And I think that's the thing that kind of held it back. And so I think it was kind of a tit for tat trade where now it's like, hey, you lost this safety. But the one thing I will say about this now is that Jalen Ramsey, they are not tied to him really past this year at all. Like they are tied to him. Like they do have money invest, but none of it's guaranteed. Like if they go into 2027 and they need cap space and Jalen Ramsey did not play an elite level, he's a $21.6 or $7 million cap hit. So like that's an easy chop and a lot of money gets freed up so that they can pay someone else with that money. But if he plays at a high level, great. Then you keep him around and you see how that goes. But I think that's where they're at right now, is that they got a good guy who's going to help them closer to the ball, who's a veteran. And they gave up a guy that was playing further back from the ball, because Minkah Fitzpatrick, he could line up closer to the line of scrimmage, but that just wasn't his best game. His best game is lining up deep, taking away the deep ball. When you tried him, he'd jump it and he would help everything align. Both of these guys are like coaches on the field with how smart they are, with how versatile they can be. But I think Jalen Ramsey, his versatility helps a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. And that's what they tried to get last year. And hey, for half the season, they couldn't use it because he had to drop back and play safety, which was not their plan at all. But I think they're looking to use that versatility this year. And with Brisker and Darnell Savage, who they've also added, along with them hoping to get back to DeShon Elliott in full strength, now he can play that role that they originally saw for him, even in Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin's defense. That now Patrick Graham can say, hey, let's move him around. They've talked about how they want to use him like Charles Woodson with the Packers back in the day, which was kind of that nickel D-back who would float around everywhere. I think that there's space to do that and to still win out on the trade. But right now, it's kind of a wash as far as who got the better of the situation.
We will see how that math shakes out this season. Training camp coming up next month. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel for everything coming at you for the rest of this month. And then as we gear up for Latrobe, please like this video if you enjoyed it. Help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. And please consider checking out our written work over at post-gazette.com. Good stuff coming from Chris, Jerry, Ray over there this week. Get a subscription while you can and get ready for training camp. And we will talk to you all again real soon.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.